To give you an idea of what we're going to do, I've brought in some samples that we've done at a couple of workshops. You'll see that they're a particular shape. We ask everyone to cut their leaf this shape. Everyone's leaf is going to be beautifully, independently different, and what will hold it together is the shape. Now, in a workshop, Alyssa, who's 9, did 2. This one. Oh, and I haven't put the other one out, I'm sorry. Her mum came along and did another leaf as well. We have another leaf done by myself and another done by the member of the guild. Basically, they use 3 stitches or variations of stitch, and we hope to teach you all of them in the next few videos. Some of my thought processes for coming up with an idea, I scribbled down. Now, I chose Harlequin by Morris West from my bookshelf. It was just a red hardcover book without a dust jacket, so it didn't give me any clues. So I googled Harlequin and came up with patterns. We can all do patterns of some sort or other. You can see I'm not a great drawer, but this gives you an idea of how to have a play with an idea. There are also traditional images of Harlequins because they wore hats with bells or stripy hats, and a lot of them had masks on. So that took me to thinking about masks and whether I could just do something with a mask. And finally, there are harlequin beetles. So I thought, well, I could do that as well. So I did 2 of those samples just to show you, and I'll stick them on the book so you can have a look. That's the mask with a couple of very simple stitches, and it didn't take too long, and I think it's sort of effective. And I'm quite like, I'll move this one over, the beetle. And again, it has lots of straight stitches, long stitches, so it wasn't too hard to execute. In the instruction pages is a template, the leaf template that I referred to earlier. You need to copy this out, or you could cut it out of the instructions themselves. And here I've made a cardboard template, just to use as an outline for your leaf shape. Draw your leaf shape with a pencil. In this instance it's heavy enough. Or you can use a pen if you prefer. It doesn't matter that much, that we have the shape that we want to stitch inside. Try and centre your template in the middle, and you can use the outside to practice some of your stitches if you like. You can use your template instruction sheet to draw your design if you like as well. It gives you an idea, something to play with. Don't cut this out, leave it whole for the moment, and we'll start stitching. You'll have your threads in your pack. Select the thread that you'd like to start stitching with first. Now these threads are quite long, so before you start stitching, I can't find the end folks, I suggest you cut it in half. If you put the needle on this long piece of thread, you're going to end up punching yourself in the nose every time you take the thread through the fabric. So cut it with your scissors to about a length that is the same as wrist to elbow, roughly that, and it's a comfortable length to sew with. Then thread your needle. Now you'll notice in the pack that our needles have really large eyes, and I've got some more examples of those, so I'll just show them to you now so that you can see how big the eyes are in the needle. So that will help accommodate our thread, because the thread is really quite thick, but it stitches up beautifully, which is why we've chosen it. So you've got, try and press your thread so that your ends aren't fuzzy. This isn't going to work, and I'm going to have to resort to licking it, I think. Oh no, I've got it through. And grab the threads and pull them through. Next step is to secure the thread either by way of a knot or in the back of the fabric. Neat stitches do this. I'll do it on the front so you can see. So you take your thread through. Doesn't matter if it shows at the back just a little bit. You just want to catch it. Probably preferable if it doesn't show. So now you've got a nice, so really this is our reverse. This is the front if we were doing the real thing. So I've shown you that, but I'll show you the other method of tying a knot, which I really like as well. Take the end of your thread on the threaded needle, stick it on your finger, put your needle down, hold the needle and thread, pinch it with your fingers, wind around twice or 1.5, pinch the top and hang on for dear life and just keep pulling, and you will end up with a knot at the end. Knots at the end of the felt don't really matter because the fabric's so thick. The purpose of having a nice fine knot that's buried in fabric like that is so it doesn't show on finer material. Now we've got our needle threaded, we can start with running stitch. We always start from the back of the fabric, so we've got our template line drawn. So maybe we might try and stitch the beetle, the harlequin beetle that I talked about before, because it covers some of the stitches. So what stitch will we use to do our harlequin beetle? Remember, we've drawn the template. I've drawn in pencil the harlequin beetle outline. This is the sample I prepared before. Just a sample of using running stitch, this stitch here, to create a whole different effect. So we're going to perhaps do running stitch around the body of the beetle first. We've knotted our thread and pick a starting point. So I'm going to start at the nose of the beetle, push the needle up through the fabric. Right. And now we're going to put the needle in and out and go all the way around. You need to think about how long you want your stitch to be. So, and whether or not you want your stitch to be consistent. So we're going to decide that the stitch is going to be this long, however long this is, and it's going to be that same size all the way around the beetle. Fabric's a little bit stiff. A trick also, don't pull your thread too hard because you'll pucker it up, and you want it to lie nice and flat for this one, so it'll sit on the tree really well. But I just want to show you, now that we've got the idea, needle in. I'm going to show you the back now. Needle poking through the back, see the back? Our knot where we started. Needle up. When you get proficient, you can scoop up quite a few stitches on your needle. But it really doesn't matter whether you do it one stitch at a time or several. So now I just want to go back to the sample underneath. So we've just done running stitch in this very similar thread. If we made different spaces, different depths or distances between the stitches, you could change the texture or length of the stitch and have a different effect. Here's a bigger stitch again. Here's a stitch using a really thick fabric. Not fabric, sorry, thread. It's a tapestry wool. And here's some very fine threads. Once we've done that, we could then move on, depending on what your project is, what you decide to stitch. You can make swirly lines, curvy lines, swirls, circles. The world's your oyster, you don't have to stop just at that. Okay, I've whizzed around the beetle and I just want to show you how to finish a thread. So it won't be too long. A little bit stiff, I've lost my momentum. You do get a nice rhythm going. Sorry, I did that very quickly. I've pushed the needle through, turned the fabric over. Now, you know how I talked about you could secure the thread at the beginning by doing a couple of very small stitches? Do that at the end. 2 small stitches. You don't have to take it all the way through the fabric. And that will just create a nice knot. Snip your thread. Okay, we might cut the tail of the other one a little bit too. It's a bit pokey out. Okay, and now we've got it secured. It won't come undone. Now we can thicken up this line, make it thicker by doing another lot of running stitch to fill the gaps. But my favourite way is to whip something. Now, I don't mean that literally. So I've got another bit of thread loaded onto a needle. So I'm going to show you how I'd whip this. I wanted to show you on our little sample piece what it looked like when it's whipped. The thread goes under all the running stitches. It doesn't pass through the fabric, just slides under the running stitch. And we'll do that to the beetle body that I've just stitched now. So I'm going to pull the needle up. See, we've got a knot at the end. It's going to have a pointy nose. So We're going to pass the needle under your running stitch, then you're going to bring the needle back again and pass it under. Always pass under from the same side. If you don't, it doesn't matter, and let me show you. What you'll end up with is a lacing stitch if you go from different sides, and it's just as pretty, but it has a slightly different effect. Let's lace his bottom and whip his sides. Doesn't have to be a real beetle. A realistic beetle, I should say. Okay, so where are we about? Back to about here, and then I'll just keep on whipping again. And when I finish, I'll hold it up or put it down. Making running stitch a little bit more fancy. We've sort of done that already because we whipped. I'm going to show you on my sample again. Remember, we went past the needle consistently through one way. We laced, because I made a mistake, if you remember, and forgot which way I was going. So the needle goes around and you get this lovely curvy line. We can make it double laced. So I'm just going to double lace this one to show you how it goes about. Now you recall when we laced, sorry, we went under and under and under. So we're actually building up the thread if we do it like this. If you find that your stitches are a little bit tight, or that you keep on catching the thread, you can always cheat. Turn your needle around the other way and put the blunter end through. That's sometimes a bit easy. Just remember though that you might have a pointy, very sharp needle and you don't want to press too hard because you'll puncture your fingertip. And another trick actually is, if you do bleed all over your work, the quickest and easiest way to remove the blood is to actually spit on it with your own spit. Delicately, of course, but your saliva has enzymes which will dissolve the blood. Okay, so now we're going to change this stitch a little bit, or just make it a little bit more fancy. We're going to lace it from the other side. Now, if you want it really loopy, just tease your threads out a little bit. Don't pull too tight. Remember to use, you can use your thumb too. I forget because I'm trying not to put it in the road, to keep the tension right. So that gives you an indication of laced stitch. Here I've put the running stitches further apart and you can lace them so you get a nice big holy effect. And here I've put the running stitches closer together and then I've whipped them, and it sort of gives a nice jagged effect. It sort of looks like the sea, if you wanted to do the sea waves or something along those lines. You can also employ short stitches just like this, a running stitch. I've used a variegated cotton here to fill in a space. We can use short straight stitches to make patterns like zigzags and bricks and stars, fans. I'm going to turn our harlequin into a more colourful sort of beetle, not the striped version I've done earlier, but add some star bursts of colour on his shell. And now I've put a knot on my thread and I'm going to work some crosses in. And all crosses are fairly obvious, and there's a couple of ways of doing them. You can do, oh, it's a blunt needle this one, or a thick thread. We can do a big cross under and over. I'm going to turn my beetle over now, just show you what the back looks like. Nothing really very fancy. Remembering, now we might do another cross up and down. Rather than a multiplication sign, we'll do a plus sign. Some of the beetles that I looked at had splodges of colour, harlequin beetles, rather than stripes like the one sample I worked on. Now I'm going to do another star, but I'm going to do it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to add a different colour to it. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit of red over this star. So just keep on filling in the holes. Each stitch you do will hold down the other one. Probably enough for this one because he's a bit small and the threads are a bit thick. But you get the gist of what I'm trying to show you. Well, I thought we need to put some legs on our beetle, so we've got 3 different stitches, just employing a long stitch that we can use to do the legs. So I've knotted my thread again, always starting at the back, and we're just going to do just a sort of long stitch, not too long. Okay, and then I'm going to do another one for the front of his leg, but that represents a leg quite nicely. I'm going to do another sort of long straight stitch like that, and then I'm going to do a much longer stitch coming up the back. Okay, just flatten it down so my tension's all right. And I'm going to couch this down. I'm going to actually use the same thread just to hold it down. So I'm going to turn the fabric over to show you. So I've come through, and I'm actually going to go halfway up the leg and just put a tiny little short stitch over it, which holds the long stitch down. Can you see? It sort of looks like he's got a kneecap or an ankle or something. And we could do the same with the last leg. Knuckles. Whoops, got everything caught up then. Okay, so little stitches like this, holding down a long thread, called couching. You can use this to hold down really fancy threads, really thick ones that you can't pass through the fabric, or that you just have to poke through the fabric. Now I want to show you one other stitch called thorn stitch, which is very similar. Move up to the antenna. I'm using a very thick pearl thread here, and it's quite hard to get through. Do a curvy sort of line. Just hold it. Now, if you like, you could change your needle and thread, but I'm just going to come up and I'm going to put a couple of crosses over. So we've, instead of doing those big crosses, we're doing little crosses. Be better at a finer thread, I think, a little more realistic. But you know how sometimes beetles have those sort of really bristly looking antennae? We could replicate that using thorn stitch. And I'm just about running out of thread, so I'm just going to pass it through the back of the fabric and finish it off. Now I'd like to show you another straight stitch, but it's different to the running stitch variations that we've been working on, or the long straight stitches. It's called stem stitch, and I'm going to run around the outside just to give this our leaf a border. So as usual, starting with your knot in the back, hold your thread out of the road a little bit, and the starting stitch will make, and I'll take the needle up about halfway from the length of the stitch, and then we hold the thread down again and just do another stitch the same size as the halfway stitch we did before, and just keep on doing that. The trick is to keep your thread down and out of the road. Whoops. And you get a nice sort of thick line when you do this. And you can use this stitch for filling, or lines, or lions, as the kids say. You can make curvy, straight, zigzag, whatever you want to do. What you can do with a line, you can do with stem stitch. Now I'll just show you a piece that we did earlier, or I did earlier, or a member's done earlier, that's got a lot of stem stitch, which gives a nice thick braid, and you can see what. In this piece, you can see that there's several lines of stem stitch, and it makes a nice thick band. So you can see how you could use it as a filling stitch or to make something bolder. In a thinner thread is another stem stitch in this circle. This is just basically running stitch in a circle, and we've got the running stitch on the outside, but the stem stitch adds a bit of weight to the piece, which makes it sort of nice. I can also show you blanket stitch, which is another way of giving an edge to a piece, and I'll put it on the other side of the beetle just so you can see. I'm going to stitch away from me. You can probably, and you put your needle in a little distance away. Hold the thread, put the needle in a little distance away, and you've got blanket stitch. You probably remember in the days once upon a time when we used blankets instead of doonas, the tops of the blankets were finished like this. You could stitch the spokes in different patterns, so you can have a long, a short, a long, a short. You could stitch them all together so you can't see any fabric behind, and then it becomes buttonhole stitch. You can make circles with the spokes in or the spokes out. And there are a whole heap of variations of blanket stitch. If you feel really enthusiastic, use Mr. Google and find it on the internet, or visit the Guild and find a stitch book which will teach you a little bit more. Yep. Now I'm going to show you chain stitch. In Butterfly Effect, done by Alyssa's mum, she put chain stitch around the outside of a to create a border. Before I'd just done running stitch, and then I did blanket stitch. But you can also do lines like the butterfly in chain stitch. And I'm going to show you how to do chain stitch just on a sample piece of fabric. I've already done one line of chain stitch, and here actually you can see a couple of variations of blanket stitch, but we'll do chain stitch through. Again, we need to make a loop. It's a looped stitch. Put the needle in and out. I'll make it quite large so you can see, and pull, and you catch your chain. You'll know if you miss your loop, because it'll just disappear into nothing and you'll have two little dots way apart. There are lots of variations of chain stitch too, but chain stitch is a really nice stitch and easy to do. And if you look at a lot of traditional Northern Indian stitches, I think there's a lot of chain stitch. A lot of chain stitch in Asian textiles generally. And it can be used as a line or as a filling stitch. Remember the important thing, keep a loop, put your needle in inside the earlier chain, I don't think I said that, and pull through. If you miss your loop, you'll end up having something that looks like that. Good luck with chain stitch, and again, look for some instructions if you need to work on this one, or visit us at the Guild. Applique, buttons and beads. For those of us that aren't confident in stitching straight away, we've got a couple of ways of getting around stitching to put some marks on your fabric. Applique is a method whereby you cut out fabric and then you still have to sew it, but it's not quite so daunting. You can sew it down. So recall we had a harlequin pattern earlier in my book. You could make something similar to that. Or if you wanted to cut out the beetle shape, you could actually cut out the beetle shape. I'd probably recommend felt because it doesn't fray and it's easy to sew. Just secure the pieces that you cut with running stitches that we've already learnt. So starting from the back with my thread knotted, you can do smallish stitches. It's a bit tougher to get the needle through because we're going through 2 layers. We could do just one longer stitch to hold down our shape. Now depending on the size of what you're sewing down will sort of make a difference as to what you choose to use. For those of us that are a bit more confident, you could use blanket stitch to hold down, or you could do running stitch and whip it or lace it. You could just keep on building. Now if you don't want to go the applique route, you can go the button route, which is one of my favourites. One of the fun things about this sort of method is that you get to play with lots of little bits and pieces, and I'm always a collector and a visitor of op shops. But I thought for this we might have a red spider. Now you will see that I've already got a running stitch border, and I've just made a spider web with long stitches, and where it got a little bit loose I couched it. Now I've made a running stitch web which the spider is hanging from, and I'm now going to sew the spider body on, and he'll be sort of like a blue back spider, I guess, because I'm putting blue thread through. Okay, so I've got the spider body hanging from his web, and I've made a point of choosing a button that just has two sort of holes, and I'll show you why shortly. Okay, so now I've got body. Whoops, sorry, forgetting. You can't see upside down as well. We'll do some legs. Maybe just some short straight stitches and give him elbows. Okay, so legs. Fairly quick to execute and lots of fun and really good for all ages. So I've hurried through and I've finished the spider and given him legs. He's having a bit of a twist, so I thought maybe we could have him attracted to something. In my beads and buttons I've got some, they're actually leaf buttons, but with a few stitches that could be a fly. We could put a dewdrop on the spider web with a sequin, and the trick with sequins is though that you need a bead to hold it down, so I'll just show you that one. I'm choosing the fat gold bead because I have, whoops, a very fat needle and it needs to be able to pass through. Right, our sequin, I'm going to hold it up, whoops, if my hand's steady enough, has a hole in the middle. I'm going to pass the needle through the back of the sequin and sit it on there, and then through my gold bead. I'm really hoping the needle will go through. It does, yay. Then I'll take the needle back through the sequin and I'll hold the bead down. Now if we were getting excited we could do maybe beads, a fly, and I would put some long stitches, long thick bundle of long thick stitches, and cover them with short stitches to make him sort of fat. In my stash of beads I also have a flower. I'll use red, it's going to be a red leaf. So we could just make a stem for the flower, a long one. Maybe some leaves. My button, check which is the front and which is the back. Put the needle through the back and stitch it down.